was hard for me being that young and being in the industry and not knowing where to turn. And
Justin Bieber didn't just make a statement, he dropped an audio grenade. And Diddy? He wasn't ready. Not for this. This wasn't PR fluff. This wasn't celebrity drama as usual. This was raw, unfiltered, and loaded with names. Names that Diddy prayed would never surface in court. And yet, here we are. As the courtroom speakers played Justin's audio, all eyes turned to Diddy. And what they saw wasn't confidence. It was shock, panic, silence that screamed. Because this time, the silence didn't protect him. This time the receipts spoke louder than his lawyers ever could. Let me break it down for you. Because what Justin just did, and when he did it, flipped the entire courtroom dynamic. Right in the middle of Diddy's federal sex trafficking trial, Justin Bieber stepped out of the shadows. And for the first time, he said something. Not everything, but enough to shake the timeline. This is the most explosive celeb court saga since the Depp-Heard showdown. But this time, it's darker, more disturbing, and still unfolding in real time. Justin Bieber didn't just make a statement. He detonated an audio grenade that left the courtroom in stunned silence. Diddy wasn't prepared for what came next. This wasn't your average celebrity PR move. It was raw, unfiltered, and packed with names no one expected to be spoken aloud. Names Diddy likely prayed would never make it into evidence. As Justin's audio echoed through the courtroom, all eyes turned to the man who once moved the industry with swagger and control. But in that moment, Diddy wasn't commanding. He was cornered. His face said more than any attorney could. Because in that clip, Bieber didn't hold back. And the silence that followed, it didn't protect, it condemned. The bombshell landed in the middle of Diddy's high-stakes federal sex trafficking trial, which had already become one of the most disturbing celebrity court dramas in recent memory. Kicking off on May 12th, 2025, in Manhattan, the trial was already teetering on the edge of chaos. But when Bieber's team broke their silence just days later, it felt like the entire courtroom shifted. The timing was surgical, strategic. This wasn't just about protecting a brand, it was about reclaiming a narrative that had long spiraled out of Justin's hands. Because for years, his teenage hangouts with Diddy had been viewed through the soft-focus lens of celebrity mentorship. But now, under the harsh light of this trial, everything was being re-examined. Every clip, every quote, every quiet moment caught on camera. Then, on May 15th, 2025, Justin's representatives dropped a carefully crafted statement to TMZ that exploded across social media. Although Justin is not among Sean's victims, the message began, there are individuals who were genuinely harmed by him. Shifting focus away from this reality detracts from the justice these victims rightfully deserve. The precision of those words was unmistakable. They weren't random. They were surgical, measured. It was a PR masterclass. But it was also the first time Justin officially addressed the swirling speculation about his past with Diddy. And with that, the floodgates opened. But that statement didn't just land on its own. It came with receipts. Multiple insiders from Bieber's circle spoke to TMZ, clarifying that despite years of speculation, Diddy never sexually or physically abused Justin. They painted a different picture, one far less sinister on the surface, but still deeply complicated. According to these sources, Bieber wasn't close to Diddy himself. His real ties were to Diddy's sons, Quincy and Justin Combs, who were in his age group. The viral public moments they insisted were just that, performative interactions, crafted for the cameras, not built on real mentorship or intimacy. But even with those reassurances, the internet wasn't convinced. Because to truly understand why this statement sent shockwaves, you have to rewind. You have to look at the uncomfortable timeline that led to this moment. Justin Bieber was just 14 years old in 2008 when he first crossed paths with Diddy. He had just signed with Usher and Scooter Braun's RBMG label, launching his meteoric rise from YouTube cover artist to global icon. At the time, Diddy was nearing 40, a music mogul with untouchable influence and a long track record of mentoring young talent. But in retrospect, that power gap raises serious red flags. What once looked like harmless celebrity bonding now feels like something else entirely. And as the allegations surrounding Diddy have escalated, people are going back and watching those old clips with fresh eyes and a rising sense of unease. One moment, in particular, has aged like spoiled milk. In November 2009, a 15-year-old Bieber uploaded a video titled Justin Bieber's 48 Hours with Diddy. It was supposed to be a lighthearted peek into their time together. Instead, it's become one of the most scrutinized clips in Bieber's archive. In the footage, Diddy presents Bieber with a silver Lamborghini and says, "As soon as you turn 16, I'm going to let you rock it." But it's not just the gift that's unsettling, it's the language, the tone, the vague suggestions. Diddy refers to their time together as 48 hours with Diddy, and then adds cryptically, "We can't really disclose what we're doing, but it's definitely a 15-year-old's dream." He even jokes about having custody of Bieber, mirroring the language he used years earlier when discussing his guardianship over Usher. He clarifies, "I don't really have legal guardianship, but for the next 48 hours, he's with me," and promises they're going to go full buck, full crazy. The video was supposed to be funny, but in 2025, it doesn't feel like a joke. It feels like a warning no one took seriously, and it doesn't stop there. In 2010, another awkward moment was captured on camera. Bieber, now 16, is greeted by Diddy, who seems annoyed that their communication has cooled. "You haven't been calling me and hanging out the way we used to," Diddy says. Bieber tries to dodge, replying that Diddy never got his number. Diddy offers to give it to him on the spot. On the surface, it might seem like a casual exchange, but to many viewers, it reads like a subtle power play. Diddy, the established star, appearing to guilt a teenage Bieber for not maintaining contact. The dynamics are uncomfortable, even if no wrongdoing is explicitly shown. Then came the 2011 appearance on Jimmy Kimmel Live, where things took an even stranger turn. Diddy and Bieber were guests, and the vibe was already off from the jump. But it was Diddy's cryptic on-air comments that truly made the internet spiral years later. He looked at Justin and said, "We've become friends in a strange way." Then, with a smirk that now feels more sinister than charming, he added, "And he knows better than to be talking about the things that he does with Big Brother Puff on national television." The audience laughed. At the time, it was played off as a joke. But in the wake of Diddy's legal collapse, those words hit different. They're not funny anymore. They're haunting. The line, "Some things ain't for everybody," wasn't just vague, it was a veil. And now everyone's asking, what exactly were those things? As these old videos reemerged, Twitter sleuths and TikTok investigators went into overdrive. Clip after clip was pulled from the archives, dissected, frame by frame, quote by quote. The mood was no longer nostalgia, it was suspicion. Even as sources close to Bieber kept insisting that his relationship with Diddy was nothing more than industry networking, the visual evidence suggested a much murkier truth. Repeatedly, they emphasized that Bieber's ties to Diddy's sons were genuine, and that the public-facing interactions were highly curated and exaggerated for buzz. But then came the real twist. A report from Daily Mail in October 2024 that claimed Bieber was deeply disturbed by the charges against Diddy. Not because he was a victim, but because it shattered a narrative he'd spent years trying to suppress. According to an anonymous insider, Bieber was shaken to his core, unable to process what was unfolding, and had emotionally shut down to avoid confronting the full scope of the fallout. That insider put it bluntly. So many people who helped make him who he is were very close to Diddy, and it's completely thrown him. The implication wasn't that Justin had been directly harmed. It was that the network of adults surrounding him during his rise to stardom might not have had his best interests at heart. That possibility alone was enough to send shockwaves through the fandom and reframe Justin's silence not as complicity, but as trauma. By the time the trial officially began on May 12, 2025, it was already shaping up to be the most watched legal drama in celebrity history. Jury selection locked in a panel of 12 men and 6 women. And from the opening statements, it was clear the prosecution came to scorch the earth. They painted Diddy as a manipulative predator who used fame and power as weapons, a man who hid behind the glitter of celebrity while running a dark and violent machine in private. But Diddy's defense team, led by high-profile attorney Tenny Gagos, fought back hard. Their strategy? Reframe everything as consensual. They argued that Diddy's relationships, however unconventional, were simply part of a swinger lifestyle. Nothing criminal, nothing coerced, just misunderstood excess. Then came the turning point. Cassie Ventura took the stand. And suddenly, the room felt different. The glamour of fame melted into raw testimony. Cassie didn't hold back. She spoke in detail about years of alleged abuse, freak-offs, and manipulation. She recounted moments that blurred the lines between romance, control, and exploitation. It wasn't just salacious, it was sobering. As she spoke, the defense tried to undercut her with screenshots of old texts, suggesting she had been a willing participant. But the damage was done. Her words landed like punches, and the public was watching closely. Right in the middle of her testimony, Justin Bieber's statement dropped. Not before, not after. Right then. And the timing wasn't coincidence. It was chess. While Diddy's lawyers were desperately trying to frame their client as a misunderstood lover, Bieber's statement came in sharp contrast, calculated, clean, and carefully distanced. It didn't accuse, but it didn't absolve either. It acknowledged. The victims redirected attention to their voices and quietly carved Bieber out of the controversy. That moment sent the media into overdrive. The narrative shifted. It wasn't just about Diddy and Cassie anymore, it was about who else had been in his orbit. And more importantly, who was now jumping ship. Social media didn't just react, it exploded. Platforms lit up with commentary, conspiracy theories, and emotional breakdowns of Bieber's past appearances with Diddy. But one voice cut through the noise with the force of a battering ram. Precious Muir, former Playboy model and frequent guest at Diddy's infamous parties. In interview after interview, she aimed directly at the adults who should have been protecting Bieber. And she didn't hold back. Her critique was scorching. She blasted Bieber's parents for their absence, for letting a teenage Justin navigate Diddy's world without oversight. "There's no way parents should have left their children with this man alone," she said, her voice seething with an "I told you so" energy that couldn't be ignored. She wasn't just pointing fingers. She was highlighting a cultural rot. According to Muir, Diddy had a way of luring people into risky situations by blurring the line between mentorship and manipulation. And young stars, hungry for fame and approval, were easy prey. Her commentary wasn't theoretical, it was firsthand. She had been there, she had seen it. And now, she was turning the spotlight on everyone who helped enable it. And she didn't stop with the parents. Muir came for Usher, too, the man credited with launching Bieber's career. The mentor who introduced him to the industry was suddenly being painted as negligent, maybe even complicit. Muir argued that Usher, of all people, should have known better. Why? Because he had lived it himself. When Usher was just 13, he was sent by his label to live with Diddy in New York, a mentorship arrangement that now reads more like a red flag than a career opportunity. Diddy, then in his mid-20s, became Usher's legal guardian during that period. The parallels were impossible to ignore. Bieber wasn't just walking a dangerous path, he was retracing someone else's steps. Usher's backstory with Diddy has always hovered quietly in the background, mentioned but never fully dissected. But now, in light of Bieber's entanglement and Diddy's federal trial, it's being reevaluated with chilling clarity. In the early 1990s, Usher was a rising teen star trying to break into the R&B scene. At just 13, he was sent to New York City by his label, LaFace Records, to live with Diddy for development. It was called the Puffy Flavor Camp, a flashy name for what, in hindsight, feels more like an unchecked immersion into an adult world no child should have been exposed to. Diddy, then in his early 20s, took Usher under his wing, guiding him not just through music, but through a lifestyle. Decades later, Usher would speak on that year in multiple interviews with a blend of nostalgia, discomfort, and restraint. He, by wind, called it wild and admitted to seeing things he didn't fully understand at the time. On The Howard Stern Show in 2016, Stern pressed him, asking if Diddy's house was like one big orgy. Usher laughed it off. Nah, not really, but didn't deny the exposure. He admitted it wasn't an environment he'd ever allow his own kids to step into, and that one admission, hell no, hit harder than any allegation. It confirmed what so many suspected. Even if he wasn't abused, he knew the world he'd been pulled into was not meant for children, which is exactly why people are now asking, if Usher experienced that firsthand, why didn't he protect Bieber?
We're told that he didn't really have any relationship with Diddy, that all of these videos are performative, and that Justin was friends with Diddy's two sons, but it really wasn't any kind of a relationship with Diddy.
Levin then shared the receipts from Bieber's team.
We contacted Justin's reps, and we kind of laid out what we found. And we said, look, this is what multiple people have been telling us who were in his life, and are no longer, and also people who are in his life now. So we've talked to both. And I think that's really important because he's jettisoned so many people in his life. And they thought about it for a while and then contacted us back, and they actually gave us an on-the-record statement that Justin is not a victim of Diddy's. They said that there are other victims and they don't want to detract from them, but they said that Justin is not a victim of Diddy.
From the same, the connection between their stories isn't coincidental, it's circular. Diddy mentored Usher. Usher mentored Bieber. And in both cases, Diddy hovered at the center. Precious Muir wasn't just making noise, she was pointing to a pattern, one that spanned decades. One that suggests this wasn't a one-time misstep, but a cultural flaw in the music industry's obsession with proximity to power, no matter the cost. But it wasn't just his parents. As the layers peeled back, it became clear that the entire industry had failed Justin Bieber. Interviewers, producers, TV hosts, executives, all the adults in the room who should have known better looked the other way. They laughed off the uncomfortable moments. They called it mentorship, networking, just part of the business. They watched as a teenage boy navigated red carpets, late-night appearances, and elite parties with grown men and never asked the hard questions. There was no outrage, only applause. This wasn't just bad parenting. This was systemic neglect, masked as opportunity. Justin wasn't simply a young artist. He was a commodity. And like so many child stars before him, the machine around him prioritized momentum over mental health, image over innocence. His rise was meteoric, but the cost was invisible, until now. The resurfaced footage, the statements, the silence, they've all collided to expose just how easily the industry allows harm to hide in plain sight. And Bieber's story, though unique in celebrity scale, fits a disturbing pattern. Powerful figures, unchecked. Young stars, unprotected. Fame used as a smokescreen for exploitation. It's a formula we've seen before, and one that too many insiders have quietly accepted as just how things are. The criticism of Patty and Jeremy Bieber isn't just personal, it's symbolic. They represent every adult who stood by, said nothing, and let charisma and clout override caution. Then came the nuclear-level accusations, this time from inside prison walls. In a 2024 interview with former mobster Michael Franzese, Suge Knight, former Death Row Records CEO and longtime Diddy rival, made headlines with explosive claims. He alleged that Diddy had molested both Usher and Justin Bieber during their teenage years. Knight didn't just drop a bomb, he lit a firestorm. He claimed Diddy had sent Bieber on romantic vacations with older men and had maintained an inappropriate relationship with Usher, including allegedly sharing a bed during a music project that mysteriously produced no songs. These weren't vague accusations. They were direct, specific, and devastating if true. But there was a catch. No evidence, no documentation, no names, just Knight's word and a long history of bad blood between him and Diddy. Even so, the allegations didn't fade, they spread. Because in the vacuum left by silence and confusion, rumors have power. Knight's reputation may be tainted, but his claims tapped into what many already feared, that Diddy's relationships with young artists weren't just questionable, they were predatory. Adding fuel to the fire was Gene Deal, Diddy's former bodyguard. He came forward with his own disturbing story, one that didn't name names directly, but hinted at horrifying abuse. According to Deal, music executives told him about a child who was hospitalized after an alleged assault by Diddy. He later claimed he realized the child was Usher. The details were vague, secondhand, and unverified, but chilling. Deal described hearing about bleeding from the butt and said he didn't fully grasp what had happened at the time. It wasn't a confession, it was hearsay. But in the court of public opinion, it didn't matter. The damage was done. Even without proof, the weight of these statements collapsed whatever room was left for benefit of the doubt. They created an echo chamber of fear and fury, where fact and speculation swirled together. People weren't waiting for convictions. They were connecting dots. Videos, interviews, silent glances, and awkward moments from a decade ago suddenly looked like evidence. In an age of virality, context died, and suspicion took its place.